Thanks very much, everybody, for attending. I'm going to hand over now to John Booth. Thanks very much, John.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this British Computer Society's Green IT SG Oxford branch joint event on the topic of climate change, energy and data centres. Before we begin, I'd just like to present my credentials and why I can speak with some authority on this topic. So I'm the Vice Chair of the Green IT Specialist Group. I'm the Chair of the BSI TCT 73 Committee, which looks at data centre standards. I am a joint author and reviewer and committee member of the EU Code of Conduct for Data Centre Energy Efficiency, the chair of the Data Centre Energy Efficiency and committee member of Sustainability with the Data Centre Alliance. I assess data centres to the DCD CEDA and the Data Centre Alliance certification. An ISO 50001 Energy Management Systems Lead Auditor, 22301 Business Continuity, Certified Audit Professional, Sustainability, and various other bits and pieces. So a nice little elephant, and we'll be talking about the elephant in the room about data centres for the rest of the talk. So first of all, what is a data centre? And it depends really on who you talk to. They range from the most basic converted office with some direct exchange cooling or DX cooling and a couple of racks to some of the world's most complex engineering environments. And they will have most of the systems on this slide. So it's a home for digital infrastructure, which includes obviously servers, network and storage. We need an electrical system to provide electrical energy, potentially need a cooling system. We need some uninterruptible power supply and generators to maintain business continuity. They will have telecoms and network cabling systems. And then there will be building integrity systems, especially for larger data centers, potentially not for smaller server rooms, which will include fire and very early smoke detection apparatus and fire suppression systems, security systems and access control. And then wrapping all around this would be the policies, procedures and processes for people to both install and remove equipment and manage equipment once it's on site. And we effectively use them to deliver digital services to both internal and external customers. And it should be at the lowest possible cost, given your risk profile. So some organisations spend a lot of money in order to maintain services, but they do not always succeed. And there have been some very high profile failures in recent years. British Airways, for example, and actually this week, one of the Amazon availability zones went down, causing wide-scale problems across all parts of the ecosystem. So there's a little picture of the digital services there. So there are some kind of definitions of data centres, which I think we need to be aware of. So for the purposes of the EU Code of Conduct for Data Centres, it basically includes all buildings, facilities and rooms which contain enterprise servers, server communications equipment, cooling equipment, power equipment, and they provide some sort of data service. So that really is quite a wide definition, and that could include comms cupboards in your local schools or offices, all the way up to huge hyperscale cloud type providers such as Facebook, Google, Salesforce, Oracle, etc. And if you are a member of the Code of Conduct, you can get yourself a little participant badge or an endorsement badge if you're in the supply chain. In the UK, we have something called the Climate Change Agreement for data centres, and that's run by the Environment Agency. And it's a kind of tax break. It's only open to commercial operators, and they must provide data centre services for profit and include co-location and hosting providers. So the definition, in order to be in this agreement, is that you have to be a standalone data center sector if you are a professional operator. And again, it says about what the facility actually means: computer equipment, and that the temperature and humidity is regulated in connection with the operation of the computer equipment. And they have a low limit of 200 kilowatts of load. And that the electricity is supplied by a backup electricity supply when the main supply is interrupted. So this is really a kind of very, very loose definition of what the criteria are. All right. So let's move quickly on to climate. And there is no doubt that we're in a climate emergency. The world is warming, and the IPCC 6 report, Physical Science Basis, published a few weeks ago, brings no real doubt to that statement. And it is causing extreme weather conditions, such as the wildfires in California and Greece. The new European temperature record earlier this summer, which was 49 degrees in inland Sicily. And of course, at the same time, there was flooding in London. And you can see from this flood map that this is the potential flood risk map for London by 2030. So that's only 9 years away. Now, this obviously isn't going to be a continual flood risk, but these are the areas that will potentially get flooded if we have those weather bomb type weather events. And as you're aware, COP26 took place a couple of weeks ago, and I'll cover that at the end of the presentation. So this slide kind of indicates the possible problems with climate change globally. Now, that there, 90 days, 123 records were broken throughout Australia, and that was actually in 2013. And more extreme weather events are happening, such as basically floods and droughts, periodically wet up in Scotland, and drought concerns almost everywhere else. And more flooding, and basically leaving our friend the polar bear clinging onto the last slab of ice in the Arctic, potentially. And I'm not going to say this is going to happen tomorrow, but it is, with global warming, it will happen at some point. And effectively, that means we all have challenges ahead. So just to go back to that 190-day, 123 records in 90 days, which was in Australia. So that was in 2013. I used it when I was on a training trip to Mauritius. And that was the latest climate data at that time. So I thought I'd look it up to see what the latest was. And effectively in the 2018-2019, which was another angry summer for the Aussies. And as I said, 90 days, 123 records were broken. And in the same amount of period in 18-19, it was over 90 days, 206 weather records were broken. And essentially the core problem, and one that I think our politicians aren't really looking at, it's effectively it's human overpopulation. The Earth can give about 1 billion people a decent standard of living, but we have 7 billion. And of course, this leads to more resource use, more energy used to extract more materials, more energy used to process food, more energy to heat homes, etc. And for digital, we are the problem. Yes, you are the problem. And now we'll discuss why. So every day, if you look on LinkedIn, you will see a new data center will be announced in some part of the globe. And perhaps there'll be multiple statements by multiple companies about data centers being built in various places. So why are we building so many data centers and using so much energy? Well, I want to explain that the data center period is in a prolonged period of growth, and there is $500 billion forecasted to be invested in the next 4 years. So where is this going? Well, firstly, it's going to places where there is a lack of a good data center footprint. So these are places like Africa, India, some of the former Eastern European countries, LATAM, etc. The second is because of the FANGs, and the acronym for FANGs is Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, and Google.
Nice one.
And so Amazon and Microsoft, for instance, and the cloud. And finally, I do think there's a bit of speculation going on. And this speculation is an investor play, as the FANGs are not building themselves. What they are, but they're not building at the pace they require. So they've gone into the market to meet demand. So they're actually using co-location data centers and creating content delivery network hubs. And if you have a question on that, I'll answer that at the end of the session. But essentially, no ICT use, no data centers. So the growth is down to you. We've a use of Facebook, buying stuff on Amazon, other cloud services, which in some cases is what I would consider to be a frivolous use of data. And to give you a quick example, that was my Sunday dinner. I can't recall when I was a lad, and I'm 57, so it's only, say, 40 years ago. I can't recall taking a Polaroid of my Sunday lunch and then showing it to my mates down the pub that evening. But people do it on Facebook. So streaming services like Netflix, Amazon for entertainment, cloud services, this is for the older generation. Does anybody recognize what that one might be? It's Cloud-Based 9, and it was from a 1960s puppet show, children's show called Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. And this one I think is quite interesting. It's what happens in Internet Minute in 2021. And we're going to have a look at that in more detail in a moment. But first of all, let's look at the 2018-2019 data. So I'm just going to take one example because it's consistent across the three graphs. Google. In 2018, every minute, 3.7 million search queries. In 2019, every minute, 3.8 million search queries. That's a steady increase in all sorts of internet activity. And if we look today, I have to find this one now. Would you believe it's not there? Okay, but you'll probably find that it's probably close to 4.7 million Facebook, Google queries in every minute in 2021. This leads obviously to an increase in energy use and thus an increase in the amount of greenhouse gases emitted. So what are those impacts of enhanced greenhouse gases? So there are 7 greenhouse gases actually. There used to be 6 and now there's 7. So obviously the first one is carbon, second one methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, purofluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride. And this new one, what I'll put in red, right, which is NF3 nitrogen trifluoride, is actually used in the manufacture of silicon chips. Okay, and as you can see, it's got a really high direct global warming potential of 17,200 times carbon, and it hangs around for 500 years. So the more chips that are manufactured, the more of this gas is going to be emitted into the atmosphere. Okay, so what all of these gases do is they create the greenhouse effect. And this is the hockey stick graph. This is the famous hockey stick graph, which was created by Michael Mann early in 2011, I think. Yeah. And it clearly shows that from data research that he conducted, which included thermometers, tree rings, corals, ice cores, and historical records, that there has been a steady global warming. And you can see that at the end where you've got the temperature in red. Okay. But because it's only one graph, it's unreliable because it's a single source document, and good scientific protocols demand that we look at other data. So we've got this one, which I think is 2017. And this is an aggregate of 3 different climate research operations across the world: Met Office, National Oceanographic and Aeronautical Association or Authority, and then NASA. Right? And we can see from this data that there is definitely a warming going on. Right, so some climate change quotes, and these are quite interesting ones, I think. And these probably were before the COP26, but I think I've seen somebody saying this. On the island where they live, it is possible to throw a stone from one side to the other. Our fears about sea level rise are very real, and our cabinet has been exploring the possibility of buying land in a nearby country in case we become refugees of climate change. That was the Minister for the Environment of Tuvalu, which is a Pacific island. We have this one: climate change is the most severe problem we are facing today, more serious even than the threat of terrorism. And that was from David King, the UK's government chief scientific advisor, in January 2004. And then this one: how could I look my grandchildren in the eye and say I knew about this and did nothing? And that was from Sir David Attenborough in 2006. So, you know, these guys are pretty, you know, they're at the coalface, as it were. And I think they probably understand what they're talking about. So I think we should be worried about this. So I'm going to come off the screen now and show you another. We're going to be looking at the sea level rise in Europe. I'm going to show you a short video. I need to find it though, so hold on. It's behind there. That's interesting. Let me minimize that. Grab it. Okay. Apologies for this short delay. Right. So what I'm going to show you here is this is a 7-meter rise. Can everybody see that? Right. So this is a 7-meter rise in sea level for Western Europe. And as you can see, the Wash has now become a very huge body of water over its current size. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick this up to 60 meters of sea level rise. And I'm just going to zoom in on your neck of the woods in Oxford. I think you'll be quite surprised. So Oxford actually becomes a seaside resort, effectively, because this is what I'm going to call the Bay of London, right? And this is the sea. So the sea will come all the way up to Oxford, right? And where I live, which is over here, we're also a seaside resort from the what can only be described as the Severn Valley, or the Bay of Severn, which is what I'm going to call it. So this, you know, and that's 60 meters. So, you know, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but, you know, I hope all of you have got houses that are on the dry spots. Right, let's get that to the now. I'm going to have to go through all of it again. And this, I think, is going to be a problem, okay? Because these are the European network connections. And as you can see, they kind of center on London and Amsterdam. That's kind of going in a bit more. And there's Oxford, there's Oxford on Sea. And you can look at that map on that web link. And you can play with it and put different rises in to see what happens. Now I'm going to move on to energy. Energy. So, as I said earlier, climate change is essentially caused by human overpopulation. So more people leading to more goods, commodities and energy use, with no prospect of any reduction anytime soon. There are 7 billion plus on the planet now, and there is 9 billion forecasted in 2050. So these are some of the European power stations in the tier 1 data center market. Okay, so we've got this power station in Germany, which is actually lignite powered, and that's a dirty brown coal. It's the most polluting of all the fossil fuels. Got the Grand Maison Dam in France, which is pumped storage. So that's very similar to De Norwig and Festiniog, which is on the electric mountains, pumped storage facilities in Wales. Got a German nuclear plant, a Dutch nuclear plant, and our very famous Drax, which is co-fired biomass and coal. And energy is interesting. So traditionally, it's all been centralized energy. So power is produced in power stations, and then it's transported via the high tension network to offices, schools, and other office buildings, commercial buildings, and also our factories. It's traditionally been a one-way traffic from the generation assets to where it is needed. But now we have, it's very much two-way. We've got wind farms, we've got solar arrays, and these can be put into the high tension network if they are grouped as an actual facility, which many of them are. But they can also be on the local generation network. And on the local generation network, you get things like domestic wind, domestic solar, and in certain cases, small anaerobic digesters. Well, what's essentially happening is that the grid needs to be strengthened to take these local sources of energy. There's something called Kirchhoff's law, which our physicists and electrical engineers will understand greatly. But this is the sort of stuff that we need to be thinking about. Right, I'm going to go to another little internet video. So I'm just going to put that on hold a minute. Right, where are we? Right, quick next slide. Right. So this is a live feed, or virtually live feed, from a company called Gridwatch. And this is the current UK energy demand here of 43.83 gigawatts. The frequency is 50, just over 50. And we can see that combined cycle gas turbines are providing 46% of that demand. We've got nuclear at 5 gigawatts, which is 11%. And we've got wind generating 9 or just under 20% of our energy. And if we look up onto the top right-hand side, we see different sources of generation. So we've got pump storage. So those are the De Norwig and Festiniog pump storage facilities. Hydro, solar arrays, obviously it's dark, so nothing's being produced from the solars. Drax is probably online, so it's producing 6% of our electricity. There is a coal-fired power station that we'll put online after the gas crisis hit, so that's producing 4%. And we've even got an oil cycle power station online, which is providing just under 0.12 of a gigawatt. And then the bottom dials here are the interconnectors. So these are where the connectors are coming in from other countries. So France connector, we're actually selling it energy at the moment. We're Dutch 2.4, the Irish ICT, that will be wind. Then we've got the East-West interconnector, Nemo, and the new Norwegian connector, which came online only a couple of weeks ago. And I think that's a really interesting resource. So this is actually updated every 15 minutes. And so this is current as of today, as of 10 minutes ago. In fact, so that's the latest one at 19:55. So that was 3 minutes ago. And I think that's an excellent piece of work there from that company.
It's fascinating.
It is, isn't it? And then the other one, which I think is really interesting, is this one. And this is from a company called electricitymap.org. And what that does is it's mapping real-time carbon and energy use as well. And it's actually, if you scroll back out, you can see there's actually quite a few countries that are on this map, and that they are attempting to fill in all the grey areas at the moment. I know the company quite well, actually. So I'm going to come back into Europe. For some reason, the Irish aren't providing any data at the moment. But if we look at these guys, right? So Estonia up here, 734 grams of carbon for every kilowatt, right? And you can see how it's made up on this side. So it's coal, and it will be lignite coal, which is why it's got a higher, slightly higher than Germany, or Poland actually. But Germany usually is that color. So it's the same color as Poland because they are using lignite. So Poland, 705 grams because they're using lignite. Germany, 462 grams. They're probably importing stuff from somewhere else. But interestingly, if you go to Norway, go down to 23 grams. Go to France, 103 grams. That's because they're importing stuff from us at the moment. Right, and the export is 323. There must be a price differential here, because otherwise, or one of their nuclear power stations is offline. And we can see that a lot of their power is nuclear and some hydro and some natural gas. So this is another really useful tool that we can use to determine what's going on in real time, which I think is fantastic. Right, now let's get back to the press. Right, so coming on to electricity in the UK, we do have a little bit of a problem. So 7 gigawatts of capacity was decommissioned by 2024. It's actually arrived early. So there is only a couple of standby plants that are online at the moment, and they are used for top-ups. But there's also 7 gigawatts of nuclear that needs to be decommissioned by 2032. That's a typo in there. And those are basically nuclear power stations that have reached the end of their natural design life. So Hinkley Point is a replacement for a couple. Then the Sizewell will probably be coming in line as well. But I think we've got a bit of a looming energy gap, which the government may or may not be treating with the seriousness it deserves. But that's a conversation to have over a glass of beer in a pub. Right, so net zero. The UK's net zero target is one of the most ambitious in the world. Okay, and it means that any emissions will be balanced by schemes to offset an equivalent amount of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, such as planting trees or using tech like carbon capture and storage. And you know, let's not diss the ambition of the UK government in releasing that net zero target, but let's also have a look at the Committee for Climate Change, which was set up by Ed Miliband during the Labour administration, and it's basically a watchdog on what the government does in terms of energy. So their progress report in June basically said, you know, UK's Climate Change Act, extraordinary foresight. It laid the groundwork for the nation's escalating climate ambition. It anticipated correctly the need to cajole governments into climate plans that would otherwise not fit the political cycle. And it has kept UK climate policies rooted in the scientific realities and the technical feasibilities. And then that network now faces its sternest test. As demand grows to see net zero delivered, the urgency becomes more obvious, and as the inadequacies of our planning for the impacts of climate change become very clear. It basically went on to say that leadership is required, details on the steps the UK will take in the coming years, clarity on tax changes and public spending commitments, active engagement with business and people across the country, and that these steps are essential. They went on to say this demands a step change in government, but remember, this is in June. It is hard to discern any comprehensive strategy in the climate plans we have seen in the previous 12 months. There are gaps and ambiguities. Climate resilience remains a second-order issue if it is considered at all. We continue to blunder into high carbon choices. This is the government's own watchdog talking about the government. And when they talk about blunder, I think they were talking about the proposed coal mine up in Cumbria which is still in debate. And they were probably talking about the North Sea oil field that was only closed this week via BP, I think, or Shell decided not to invest in it. It goes on to say that the planning system and other fundamental structures have not yet been recast to meet our legal and international climate commitments. Quite damning stuff, I think. But it says, there is still time to create this. This progress report offers more than 200 policy recommendations covering every part of government. The opportunity to implement them is there before COP26 and net zero strategy is promised. Obviously, this was written in June. But it says it's time for the government to implement these changes with the urgency that the science demands. So actually, the government did produce a document, and this is Mr. Johnson's 10-point plan. Advance in offshore wind, tick. Advance in the growth of low carbon hydrogen, delivering new and advanced nuclear power, accelerating the shift to zero emission transport, green public transport, jet zero and green ships, greener buildings, investing in carbon capture, usage and storage, protecting the natural environment, and green finance and innovation. Very laudable stuff. And then we've got the reality of Boris Johnson's 10-point environmental plan, and this is the Daily Mail. But, it's the Daily Mail, so that's all we need to say. It's the Daily Mail. So they're going to find fault in everything, but that was a comprehensive kind of dismissal of the UK government Prime Minister's plan. Well, what can I say? Right. The government did publish its net zero strategy on the 19th of October. Build Back Greener. Spoke about power, fuel supply, hydrogen industry, heat buildings, transport, all the usual stuff, but no reference to data centres anywhere in the document, which is quite alarming. Right, back to data centres. So data centres are facing two specific challenges. We are going to likely to be impacted in the near future by two main issues, both related to climate change. The first is the increased possibility of extreme weather events, flooding and heat waves. The second is access to energy. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail about the recent and ongoing energy cost issues. That was to be expected by our exit from the EU, because the core issues are not Brexit related. These are rather a lack of long-term planning. Data centres will find out in a few slides' time are large energy users. And to put it really simply, there has not been the investment in the grid infrastructure in the UK to support new data centres. But how much energy do data centres use in the UK? Well, we really don't know. Isn't that terrible that we don't know? What we do know is that the period from the commercial data centre sector, co-location sector that I spoke about a few moments ago, the Climate Change Agreement's second period data published in September 2017, so it is 4 years old, but I have got the updated one, I'll cover it in a moment, was 2.579 terawatt hours. That's how much we used in that period. And you can find this out online. There's a nice document from Tech UK, which was one of the architects of the scheme, and that's what it'll tell you, 2.579 terawatt hours. And that represented 0.76% of the total amount of electricity generated in that year. And that represented, which was 339 terawatt hours, which is 0.285% of primary energy. So which is 2,339 terawatt hours. So primary energy is the actual energy content in the fossil fuels. So a ton of coal will have a certain amount of primary energy assigned to it, and other things will as well. And you can find that in the climate change second target report data. But that excludes BT, which was third in the carbon reduction commitment tables before they were abolished by the government, in the Conservative government in 2010. And it excludes all private data centres and server rooms everywhere else. So we conducted some research in 2017, and we're just about to update that over Christmas, actually, for our slide decks for next year. But we said that there's probably likely to be about 80,000 data centers and server rooms in the UK. And that was based on the amount of businesses that employed over 250 people. So we found out there were 33,000 businesses that employ up to 250 people, and there were 7,000 that employ over 250. So that's 40,000 businesses. And we suspected that each one of them would have a cooled server room, perhaps more. And then added some 40,000 for government, local authorities, emergency services, universities and schools to make the total around 80K. And we worked out that each room would have around 50 items of IT kit. So that would be servers, storage and network. And we used some standard energy consumption rates from industry to determine that these sites would cost around £57,000 per annum. And then we multiplied that by 80 and looked at the energy. And that worked out to be 38.54 terawatt hours in 2017. We add the climate change agreement to that of 2.579 terawatt hours. We get a total of 41 terawatt hours, just over 41 terawatt hours, which equals 12% of UK generation, which is a truly alarming figure. And I spoke to Emma Fryer from Tech UK, and she did not dispute those figures. And there's a very good reason for that. So thinking about the third period. So Tech UK haven't done what they did in the previous reporting period, but they were in pandemic. So let's give them some grace on that. But they do recognise the problem that I mentioned earlier, and that's of enterprise IT and basically everything that's not in the climate change agreement itself. So for the companies that are in the climate change agreement, the sector performed well against its third milestone target. In fact, it has met its efficiency target 3 years before the end of the target. So actually really well done. We have done it 2 years ahead of schedule. But at individual facility level, the picture is more mixed. So the sector is not complacent and will be working harder than ever to build on these improvements. The climate change agreement ends in 23. We're not quite sure what indication the successor might take. Tech UK would like to see a policy tool that drives activities to where it can be performed most efficiently. And this is the damning part of this statement, is this one. Whilst the commercial sector is heavily scrutinised, we still need to tackle the lingering problem of distributed IT. And the distributed IT is everything that's not in the climate change agreement, which accounts for probably another 10% or so, or 12%. So in the climate change agreement in the third period, there were 89 organisations in the scheme, and 48 of them did not meet their target. Right? So they have to buy carbon credits. But what was the third period data? The fourth is due at the moment. Right? So the third period data, so this is 1920 data. Data center power consumption has gone up to 3.1 terawatt hours. So there's been a 0.6 terawatt hour increase in energy consumption. So those figures are only getting worse or better, I suppose, depending on the way you look at it. Right. The thing is, in 2007, the EU had estimated that across the EU, it was actually 56 terawatt hours for all data centers in all 28 member states. And that by 2020, it would go to 104 terawatt hours. And this would have made a problem for policymakers, the bill payers, and a compelling argument for energy efficiency. And remember, this has been tempted by an 18% compound annual growth rate in the data center sector and the rise of cloud services across the globe. So what are the energy forecasts? So a recent article in Science magazine had this to say: Assessing the implications of growing demand for data centers requires a robust understanding of the scale and drivers of the global data center energy use that has eluded many policymakers and energy analysts. The reason for this blind spot is a historical lack of bottom-up information on data center types and locations, their information technology equipment, and their energy efficiency trends. This has led to a sporadic and often contradictory literature on global data center energy use. You can read that article in that link. So, is it 1% of global energy? Is it 2% of global energy? Is it 3% of global energy? Well, I reckon it's probably, depending where you are, it could be 5 or 6%. In 2010, it estimated was 153. And then when they looked at it back in a different period, it was now 1.1 to 1.5. And in 2018, they revised their figures and said it was only 1%. And again, that's in the Science magazine article. And they basically recommended 3 policy recommendations. Policy support for energy efficient standards of IT equipment, investment in new technologies, didn't quite say what they were, but just said investment in new technologies, and that there should be more public data and modeling, and that the growth of data center construction could lead to a doubling in compute capacity in the next 3 to 4 years. And that we're entering a critical phase and we must have more reliable data from the data center industry. You can read that in the thing. So I'm glad to announce that actually there has been some movement at European level on policy support for energy efficiency standards. And there is also some policy support for public data and modeling. And they have been investing in some EU-funded Horizon 2020 projects on investment in new technologies. So over in Europe, we have the EU Green Deal. And on the 11th of December 2019, Europe needs a digital sector that puts sustainability at its heart. The Commission will consider measures to improve the energy efficiency and circular network economy performance of the sector itself, from broadband networks to data centers and ICT devices. Very clear direction of travel made by the EU on that particular date. The 19th of February in 2020, this statement: data center telecoms will need to become more energy efficient, reuse waste energy, and use more renewable energy sources. They can and should become climate neutral by 2030. But is data center energy use a problem? Well, there is a lack of credible data. The EU Code of Conduct data from 2017 indicated that 289 data centers consumed 3.7 terawatt hours on that year. And if we look at the climate change agreement data, that was 2.579. Does that mean that EU data centers only consume 1.21 terawatt hours? It's a question that needs to be addressed. So I'm going off data centers for a moment. I'm going to talk about lockdown. So did lockdown affect energy use? Oh yeah, clearly it would have done. There was a peak lockdown. Most of us were sitting at home than ever in UK history, and many of us were watching specific programs in real time rather than they were recorded. Boris Johnson's speech to the nation drew a staggering almost half the country, and then the Queen's address on the 5th of April. The colleagues at the National Grid saw these big viewing figures impacted energy use. For example, a 500 to 600 megawatt pickup at the end of the Queen's address. Basically, people going off to make a cup of tea. We can see that quite significantly on this graph from the National Grid ESCO. The small dip this is for clap for clarers. So a small dip just as the clapping starts. People go out and clap for 5-10 minutes, and then they come back in and put the kettle on or turn the televisions on to watch whatever was on. Also, lockdown lie-ins. The morning peak moved later. So pre-COVID, right? People started, energy started to pick up around 5:30. And this is when your central heatings kick in. People get up, they use showers, they might turn on the morning television, they might turn on a kettle for a cup of tea, etc. And then they would go off on their daily commute. But post-lockdown, post-COVID, this moved later. You know, the peak didn't really start until 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it didn't get as high either. So the morning peak moved later. And then there's this data, but there was a drastic drop, as you'd expect. Obviously, people not going into the office meant that the office systems weren't being hit as hard as they normally would be. Restaurants and bars and hotels and restaurants were shut, so obviously cooking in those sort of establishments would have dropped as well. So there was that huge lockdown drop, but as we can see, by the time of this data, which I think was July last year, we kind of got back to kind of where we were. So in essence, traditional TV pickups made a comeback. Clap for carers called a spike in demand. Lockdown lie-ins, the morning peak moved later. Now on to COP26, and I choose my photograph very carefully. What were the outcomes? So, effectively, US-China cooperation, methane, clean energy transition and decarbonisation, all very good stuff. A further call to stop deforestation of trees in the Amazon and other parts of the world. Some more focus on methane, which is 4 times more potential than carbon. So 30% reduction by 2030. Shift away from coal, and the realization that there was 130 trillion of support available for clean tech. Now, it's arguable whether or not that money is new money. I suspect it was money that was already in the budgets for stuff. It's just been diverted to more renewable net zero type of goals. But what about tech? So the BCS had one of their reporters up at COP, and there was a press release issued on the 15th of 11, 2021. COP26 is a fantastic example of greenwash, says BCS experts. I'm afraid it's me, Vice Chair of the British Compute, says disappointed by the outcome of COP26. As Greta Thunberg said in her tweet after the declaration was out, it's more blah, blah, blah. And in essence, we are kicking the can the road to the next COP. In terms of technology companies, actions speak louder than words, and their words ring hollow at this moment in time. Unfortunately, it's a fantastic example of greenwash. The entire IT sector needs to wake up to responsibilities from raw materials extraction to delivery of cloud services and the recycling of e-waste. When it comes to data centers, for all the rhetoric, continuing to build new facilities globally to 20th century designs when we should be having a radical rethink is just business as usual. The tech and the concepts to deliver truly energy efficient and sustainable data centers is well developed and it's ready to go. It's time for the operators and investors to re-educate their customers and start to build them. So we're all doomed, as Fraser would say. I like the twinkle in his eye, and I've got one as well. So no, we're not doomed. I think that individual companies and in some cases, some sectors are wholesale embracing innovations needed to address our global problems, and that we will deal with them. So we have the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have the new and emergency standards from the BSI and CEN-CENELEC. The BCS has some plans in the pipeline, which will probably be published after Christmas. We have the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact. And then we also have the iMasons, Infrastructure Masons Sustainability Framework for Data Centers. So I'm going to briefly talk about 2 of those things now. So the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact has 6 pillars, which will require the reporting of some metrics to the Commission. And I'll cover those in a moment. But the 6 pillars are energy efficiency, clean energy, water, circular economy, a circular energy system, and finally governance. Now, the architects of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact hoped that this would be a self-regulatory initiative, but it appears that this will not be the case. There is a proposal for mandatory data center registry contained within the EU Green Deal Fit for 55 proposals published a few weeks ago, but it is, for the time being, merely a proposal and will have to be ratified by Parliament. Those are the 5 pillars. And what I did, I mapped those pillars to the associated ISO 30134 metrics. So the first one is the metrics, which provides an indicator, overview, and general requirements. /2 or -2 is power utilization effectiveness, which most data centers are reporting for energy efficiency. That probably needs some work. Then we have clean energy is the renewable energy factor, which is a metric. And then we have potentially the use of -4, which is IT equipment energy efficiency for servers and IT equipment utilization for servers. We also have circular energy systems, the energy reuse factor, or ERF, which is -6. Clean energy could be used as the carbon usage effectiveness metric, which is -8. That's only recently just been published. And then finally, for water, we have the water usage effectiveness metric, which is -9. For the sharp-eyed amongst you, -7 is cooling efficiency ratio, but that hasn't been fully published yet. The vision of the architects of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact is that the Pact develop the targets, and the EU Code of Conduct is the mechanism to attain those targets. There's also something else that probably needs to be brought to your attention, that there is the Infrastructure Mason Sustainability Framework, and this splits the data center ops into 4 main areas. So we've got strategy, design and build, and pre-operation, energy efficiency, water, waste, innovation, and transparency in the operational sphere. Post-operation is decommissioning and e-waste. And then they've also included diversity, social responsibility, and transport. And there is a checklist of questions per area, which I am actually in the process of sorting out with my colleagues on the Sustainability Committee. And they will get scored on them, and then they will either be categorized into one of these 5 categories. So either a reactive organization or value-driven organization moving forward. There's also a body called the Sustainable Development Infrastructure Alliance, which Carbon3IT is a member of, and also the Data Center Alliance. And they have created a roadmap for sustainable digital infrastructure by 2030. And you can look through the roadmap and look on that link. Now, the thing about the digital roadmap is it doesn't just look at the physical data center infrastructure and electromechanical components. It's actually looking at the software side of things as well, and also transparency across metrics. So it's a very good place to go. One of the projects we worked on last year was the Catalyst project, which aspired to turn data centers into flexible multi-energy hubs. And as part of the output of that project, we created a Catalyst roadmap, which shows basically it needs an update now, because a few documents referenced on here have been published and updated. But it shows you the routes that a data center operator can take if he wants to consider certain things. And it's based on the EN 5600 project element, or the project line, which is this line here with the U in it. And that follows the recommendations that are contained within the EN 5600-1 standard. And you can look at that map on that link. So essentially, we all have to wake up and understand that our digital life is harming the planet. And with that, is there any questions? Actually, no, before we did questions, if anyone was keeping score of the animal pictures, there were 29 animals from 9 species.
What's the significance? 29?
No significance at all. Just,
okay. Are we paying attention?
Well, you know, I did do a presentation to a Dutch customer once, and I put the animals in, and I said, right, does anybody keep account? And one of them had kept account. So,
okay.
Which is quite interesting. So does anybody have any questions? There's 11 questions in the chat, I think, and we've got 2 in the question answers. So
11, are there actually 11 questions in the chat?
Well, I think I mean, you can open them up if you want.
Yeah. Let's start with the Q&A questions since they came in early. Can you actually see them, John?
Yes, I can. So,
Yeah, good.
what, according to you, need governments and the population of the world to be able to effectively tackling climate change and reducing climate change impairments? That's a really difficult question. And I suspect the answer is not going to be great, but you know, it's overpopulation. So I think we'd probably need to move to a temporarily the one-child policy that China had for some time, which cut their population down. But I'm great. Whilst I believe that technology will assist us in our goal, the simple thing is we have to decarbonize the grid. And we have to be more clever about our use of energy. So I actually personally believe that energy is too cheap at the moment, and I'm really aware that I will get howls of anguish from certain quarters saying, how can you say energy is so cheap? But, you know, we are wasting energy, and we need it to be more expensive so that we can improve what energy does for us and how it gets to where we need to get to. I mean, I'll put that example in earlier with the power generation assets, and how it relates back going through the high tension line, etc. I've got another slide which I didn't put into this deck actually, but it shows the power path for from a power station all the way through to a chip in a server in a data center, and this is a truly horrific number, right? But only 0.5% of the energy that is generated at the power station is actually used to provide power to that chip. Right? And that is an appalling figure, and we really must improve on that. So I have a continual call out to the industry that we need to do a radical rethink, and we need to optimize what it is we've got. Right, Shamel, do you believe in the viability of achieving goal of net zero? We need to continue to develop an alternative and clean sorts of energy and try not to abolish the traditional sorts of energy, but using traditional energy sources. But I think I've answered that question. No, we have to get rid of fossil fuels. It's as simple as that. And we have to think about how much energy we need to generate, and we need to be more energy efficient. It's as simple as that. Right, so we've got one.
Let's have a look. Have a look in the chat. See if we've got any questions in there. No, I'm not sure there's actually any questions. There's more just chat that's in here, I think, John. Yeah.
Oh, we've got one here from Caroline. How can technology help the energy industry? Yeah, so I think this is quite an interesting one, actually. We need to develop something like an energy ping, I think. So if you use a ping command in the command window, you can basically see how many different parts of the network you are going through in order to reach your destination. And I think we need to have an energy ping, which does the same thing, but what it does is it basically measures the energy that's being used at each of those hops, so that you can actually sit in your office and work out how much energy your link is using. And I think from a cloud perspective, there is always great numbers for the cloud. You know, if you go into the cloud, you will reduce your energy consumption in your own data center by up to 95%. Well, you know, it's plainly not true, because what you produce in the data center, you end up adding to the grid.
So are you saying that consolidating data centers in bigger sites is less efficient than
Well, it could be, and it might not be. We're not quite sure yet. because nobody's ever researched that middle element, which is the network side of things.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
one of the figures I'm aware of, if people, when you do a search on Google, that can hit hundreds of servers, just one search, and it can even hit thousands of servers where Google, for as an example, attempt to find the data that you're searching for. And so that's, I would have thought, is an argument for consolidating things, but
there are many reasons to going into the cloud.
yeah,
and I don't think energy efficiency is one of them.
right.
It's the security element, it's the efficiency of that particular site.
Yeah.
And there are the virtualization of the cloud network is perfect. But, I was at an event last night and I was talking to a few people that are quite prominent in the industry, and they were telling me that they're getting increasingly being asked to move stuff off of the cloud and put it back onto on-prem data centers.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Which was a surprise to me, as to anybody else. So I think that's quite interesting. Genius, I've got the web address for the flooding is on the screens at the moment.
Is that Janice asking a question there?
Yeah, it was like, can you give us the website address for the flooding?
Okay, I must have missed that one.
Right.
Okay.
And then Lawrence Cox, will Bitcoin generation receive special attention in local and global analysis and the split between CO2 and renewable energy to support these activities? Right. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, in my mind, very, very bad. Blockchain, on the other hand, is very, very good. Right, so because blockchain gives you an irrefutable kind of evidence and timestamp that that document was created at the time and has not been amended.
Yes.
So blockchain is a perfect methodology, and I think you will begin to see more blockchain-y type applications being applied to the energy sector. So, for instance, there is some angst about the amount of renewable energy that's generated in the amount of companies that are actually saying that they're using it, right? So there seems to be a bit of a shortfall. And technically in the UK, you have to be able to sign off and show a renewable energy certificate or ROC or REC, which basically proves that you used the energy from that particular site. And then it's actually, it dies, right? So it cannot be used twice. Now, unfortunately, from some of the reports we're hearing, in certain countries where there isn't a strong and robust methodology of kind of aging those certificates, they seem to be being resold. So I think with blockchain, we'll be able to really pin down on those guys. And I think
you're making an argument for blockchain as a piece of technology from a security viewpoint.
Yes. So that, if you've got a solar array and it generates 100 megawatts of energy a year, and you sell it to 10 people, so 10 megawatts each, then you can't then go into a different market and sell the same energy.
Gotcha.
To another. So it has to be like linked, and I think the energy pin would be also something else.
Okay.
But some mines. I mean, look, China's just shut down every Bitcoin mine in China for some reason, right? Because they obviously feel that it's not particularly conducive to energy efficiency. And what they've done is they've moved into places like, they've just literally gone across border. So they're in places like Mongolia, and they're the sort of places that really can't handle the level of Bitcoin mining. It will suck all of the power away for that. And it's an interesting one. I talk to certain people in the sector, and they hate Bitcoin and all of the cryptocurrencies with an absolute vengeance. And they say they're absolutely useless, and they're just causing energy to be used. But having said that, I've got friends of mine who run companies who are making a lot of money from selling energy efficient cooling solutions to Bitcoin miners.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
there is, it's, you cancel one part of an operation and it has knock-on effects.
I mean, certainly I work in the industry that supplies some of the data centers, and they are always pressurizing us for more efficient product. The storage products we produce, it's a constant aim. So but I think, the Googles and the Amazons of this world do it because they want to save money at the moment, not because they're under legislative pressure to do so.
Well, I think that's going to be quite a short period of time where they're not under legislative pressure.
True.
So we are working with the European Union on creating various legislative bits. So, and we're not asking them for much. We're just asking them to report their information transparently.
Yeah.
But that information will need to be, verifiable.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think that the fact that data is free? I mean, in most countries of the world, you now pay just a standard fee, and then it doesn't matter too much how much data you actually use. So I can gaily search the web for free once I've paid my one-off charge. Do you think that's a main driver for this massive use of people sending pictures of their lunches? And if we had to pay for data, is that a way of pulling the energy usage down?
Well, it's a very interesting question. So a colleague of mine asked this question of his children around the Christmas dinner table about 4 years ago. And he said, how much would you pay to use Facebook in terms of a monthly fee, so that you could put all your photographs and basically that. And they kind of said, we would pay up to £10 a month to access Facebook.
Yeah.
And have unlimited data and things like that. So that's one way of doing it. But I think data is an area where we're going to have to, there's more data today than there has ever have been, and it's twice as much as there was yesterday.
Oh, it's scary. It's a scary amount of data.
And you've got to ask yourself whether or not some data is worth keeping. And I think that's going to be the next big kind of area, is redefining what data is. You go to some organizations and you say, right, how much data have you got? And they go, oh, we've got this. And you go, okay, you've got all that, but why are you keeping it for that long? Because we follow the bank's kind of approach on keeping data for 7 years. But nobody ever gets rid of data. And I think that's the problem. So we have got another message from Lawrence Cox.
Okay.
Who says, is national reporting of energy use include international distributed assets, i.e. Amazon data centers? And that's a very good question. So under the streamlined energy and carbon reporting legislation that was introduced just before we entered the pandemic, an organization in the UK is supposed to record all of its energy use, regardless of where the energy is actually used. So if they have a significant cloud structure, and they are using an Amazon cloud instance, an AWS instance, then technically they should report that energy use in the UK in their company report. The problem is that when you go to Amazon and say, oh, we're XYZ Corporation, we have a significant cloud stack in your environment, can you please tell us how much energy we're using? And Amazon won't be able to tell you. Now, however, this week, both Amazon and Google published documents that said that you would now be able to ask them what energy use you were making of their assets. Unfortunately, it is very, very basic, and it's based on a financial. So what they've done is they've basically calculated all of their energy consumption across all of their estate, right? So remember, for Amazon, that includes their distribution warehouses and all of their distribution fleet. And they basically said, right, if you spend $20 with us on cloud services, we've worked out that for every dollar of revenue, we have 20 grams of carbon. So it's basically a multiplier. You use 20 grams of, you spend $20 with us, it's going to be 20 times 20 grams. So 400 grams of carbon you would use for that particular instance. But that's not going to, I don't think that's going to be robust enough for reporting. If you report under the verified guidelines, the ISO 14064 series for GHG emissions, you are supposed to calculate scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. I didn't mention them in the slide deck, but scope 1 is energy you use yourself. So, and let's say in a data center environment, that would be the energy you use for your diesel generators and maybe top-ups for your fluorine gases in your refrigeration system. Scope 2 is the purchased energy, so that would be from your grid operator. But it could also include steam or gas that you buy in from a third party that's distributed to you via district heating or something else. And then scope 3 is literally everything else, both upstream and downstream, the service network that services your data center. So that could include the fire protection system, the access control system, the embodied energy of all of the capital planting components on a data center, the use of third-party remote hands, the transportation, the whole of it, which is why the industry and a lot of industries haven't really gone down that route yet to calculate scope 3, because it is an absolute minefield and you really have to know your stuff. Unfortunately, there are not that many people that know how to do that, but we will get there. Does that answer your question, Lawrence?
See if we get. You could raise your hand, I think.
I'm going to stop share so that I can see everybody.
Okay.
And I'm going to go to the view.
You're able to see the entire audience.
Well, there's 20, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we got 22 online now, I think.
Okay. So, any other questions?
Yeah, just I have a constant argument with my daughter. She's got the real ump with Amazon. So just taking the view of shopping, what's your personal view of? I mean, I do a lot of my shopping, Christmas shopping, for example, via Amazon, and I actually feel more eco-friendly because I'm doing it that way rather than multiple trips to the shop and using my personal car. I do wonder what your personal view of that particular situation is.
Yeah, so it's always a tricky one, but it's actually a green IT aspect, right? So if let's take shopping, for instance, right? So during pandemic, online shopping has, exploded, and especially online food shopping.
Yeah.
So in terms of online food shopping, it has to be better to have one van that does 20 deliveries for 20 different households rather than have 20 cars driving to a hyperscale shopping center, then people going around filling their trolley with what they want to buy, then unpacking it and putting it through the scanners in the store itself, paying for it, putting it back into the trolley, taking the trolley out to your car and putting it into your car, and then coming home and then taking the shopping out of the bags and putting it wherever you store it. So in terms of the comparison of one person staying ready, when the delivery comes, it's already packed in bigger, more secure and more kind of protective plastic trays. You can take it out, you know, and then you can put it where it needs to go. So you're missing out on all of that kind of driving to the shop, doing to this, doing that, doing all those parts. So in terms of food shopping, there is definitely a green IT aspect to it. In terms of Amazon shopping, you can argue the same thing. You know, if you can go into Amazon and basically buy everything you want in one place and it will get delivered to you, but it might be delivered to you by 5 different deliveries, depending on what's happening. So really what you would want them to do is, and I think there is a facility to do it, is to wrap it up into one delivery.
In Amazon, yeah, you can have the delivery day, and they were actually quite prompt and efficient in setting that up. So they were quite well motivated on that front, probably to save them money as well. But yeah.
Yeah,
so
and of
yeah,
course the other thing is that there are you know, commercial operators invariably have logistics software, right? So apparently, well, in UPS, for instance, in the States, they will never turn right at a junction, because turning right at a junction is a stop sign, and they have to indicate and waste petrol. For the traffic to come.
Okay.
So their traffic routing will always take them to turn left at a traffic junction, because in the States you can turn left, even if the lights are red.
Right.
They worked out it was saving them $600,000 a year.
Okay.
For all of their delivery fleet.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a significant amount.
Yeah. I wouldn't even think about it for myself, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, but you know, but if you think that every organisation started doing that, or that you were linking a you know, an important product delivery, and you could somehow change the lights so that it would have a smooth path and not have to shut down and emit pollution into the local traffic.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, there's a whole big piece of green IT technology just on the kind of future transport systems, and we can see this in some of the World Resource Institute's better public transport, for instance. We're going to have, you know, the car is a relatively new invention. It's only been around for 100 odd years, 105 years. Before that, everybody used horses and carts. And you know, I think we're going to have to get back to public transport, and public transport. And the loss of the car as a transport mode is going to have to make a rethink on how we live our lives. We're not going to be able to commute long distances for work, for instance. So people would have to start working locally, which is working from home. The danger there is that, you know, it's all
more
very
data centers.
Well, to be honest, although I've been, you know, banging on about data centers and their energy efficiency and consumption, the fact remains that without data centers, we would never have got the genome of the COVID-19 identified. We wouldn't have all of the IPCC data. And, you know, I was looking into that recently. They used 4 different supercomputers to crunch all that data that they're getting. You know, and we allowed the working from home. We've allowed the purchases of goods via online shopping. We've allowed the entertainment to be cascaded down into people's homes. So on that point of view, you know, data centers are a good thing.
Yeah.
And they're very good.
Yeah, it's the use we put to them that's needs to be thought about.
So Lawrence has actually put up a supplementary question, and he said, would you suggest that UK data centers go offshore to the cloud to reduce energy demand in the UK, did you say, by 12%? Right, so no, that's the last thing we want, because they employ people in the UK, right? And our, actually, because of the historic nature of where the UK stood in terms of its place in the European data center market, we got a lot of investment back in the 90s when the American banks started moving into the city. We have an ecosystem of personnel, engineers that are the designers of data centers that are efficient and are very sustainable, and they all reside in the UK. What it's meant to Europe is, obviously, because of Brexit, is that they are now basically not able to use our staff to do their designs and operate their facilities. And there is a global shortage of data center professionals, and there has been for some time. There are 300,000 jobs before 2025 based in the data center industry, which have yet to be, these are just for the data centers that are under construction today. And that's not including the forward plan for more data centers. So, you know, the world will be your oyster if you are a data center aware person with the electrical, mechanical and IT operational skills. I don't think what we need to do in the UK, Lawrence, to answer your question, is we need to make those data centers that are in the UK more efficient. And there are plenty of things. I did some research that suggested that we could save 77 million in revenue just by adopting the EU Code of Conduct.
And what sort of changes are you thinking of there?
Well, the changes literally, it's improving the airflow characteristics through these servers and raising the temperature. That's the two simple ones, and you will get at least 10 to 15%, maybe more out of that. Then if we start really looking at what we are doing in terms of data, what are we keeping, who are we giving access to? You know, at the moment, a corporate IT estate isn't, it's run well, but it's not run as well as it could be. And an example I would use there is, it's like comparing a Formula One racing car from Lewis Hamilton's car today to maybe a car from the 50s.
Right.
Right. So, you know, there are improved options. You know, it does what it does. It says on the tin, you will get those services, but are you using those services in the optimum way of doing so? And I'd have to say no.
Okay. Understand.
So yes, I wouldn't suggest that they go offshore at all. No, not at all. I think we can optimize some of those server rooms in the UK. And I think there's a lot of work that we could do. I mean, for instance, get this, then you'll be really surprised. In the Netherlands, they have a data center spatial strategy. So they have 6 areas within the Netherlands which are allocated for data center growth. And these are the big hyperscale jobs. And they basically, there's a whole strategic document that talks about data centers in terms of staffing, training, location, waste heat reuse, where the energy is coming from, etc. In the UK, nothing like that at all. So that's basically, to me, that's a failure of government. But we are slowly but surely working on them in various fora. You know, we are finding out who's responsible. I mean, the first thing, which I think is crazy, is that data centers are actually included in the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And really, they should be in the Department for Business, Energy, Innovation and Skills.
Okay.
So just putting it into the right place would be good. So any other questions?
Audience, and any other final questions? We're approaching 9. No. Okay. Okay, everybody, if there aren't any more questions, thank you very much, John. That was really fascinating. Perhaps if you can all raise your hands just to thank John in the electronic clap. That's probably perfectly valid use of energy. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
Yeah, and if you have any further questions, you recorded the deck, so we'll be able to people will be able to look at the questions. My email address is slide deck.
Are you happy for us to publish the slide deck, or just
no problem? No problem.
Okay, I'll talk to you about that via email afterwards then, John.
Okay, yep, no worries.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody. And John, thank you. Thanks for all the effort. And yeah, you were right. That was a new slide deck. Made some really, really good points.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.